Hello and welcome to this episode of Creative Impact. Today's episode is about architecture. And as we know, creative architecture has a profound impact on societies by shaping the physical, social, cultural, and economic fabric of communities. Sustainable architecture practices actually contribute to the environmental stewardship, promoting energy efficiency and reducing carbon footprints. Economically, creative architecture stimulates development and tourism, driving focal economies and creating opportunities for growth. By inspiring creativity, innovation, and cultural exchange, creative architecture enriches the lives of individuals and enhances the overall quality within a society. With us today is Mr. Anas Ayoub, CEO of XD House and former architect at luxury hotel Palazzo Versace. I actually met Anas a number of years ago when he kindly agreed to deliver a guest lecture about creativity and innovation in architecture. And he shared some of his personal hobbies with us, such as 3D printing and design. Fast forward to today, we are here to discuss his long journey, which has led him to set up his own company in the UK, which is an accumulation of experience, passion, and love for creativity. Anas is creating impact by inspiring students, but also by serving architects with creative solutions behind the scene. Anas, welcome. It's a delight to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start by asking you to take us back all the way to the beginning.
Well, it all started when I came to the world. I was born in the United Arab Emirates in Dubai. I was born in a family that is middle class, middle child, running through my way to maybe being visible to others in a big family with a lot of siblings, in a metropolitan city perhaps like Dubai as well. I think I'm a product of the environment that shaped me today. So that's who I am. Thank
you for sharing that personal detail with us, and it probably gives us a perspective on your career and how it's been shaped. So perhaps if you take us to the moment where you decided to study this field and your first studies and how you went to Spain afterwards.
So I'm an architect by trade. I studied architecture based on the influence of what could be perhaps a successful profession that I could start with. And I remember my father was trying to convince me to go for civil engineering. And he was trying to put me in contact with some of his friends who are civil engineers, and they were trying to tell me that civil engineering is like a joker card. You can really put it anywhere, and you can have more chances of working. But I was very stubborn about the fact that I really need to unlock this puzzle of architecture. I was looking at buildings, and I was always having this mystery of thoughts where I don't understand how a certain individual can have full vision and an understanding to a complex thing like a building with all its materials and systems and that was my trigger. As simple as that, really. Not necessarily from a background. I come from a background where both my parents are illiterate. They come from a working class. So I didn't have that much clarity and vision on what architecture is, but the whole understanding about what this profession is came later on. So I didn't have a lot of expectations, which made the journey for me a little bit more pleasing, to be honest.
First of all, what's creativity to you?
Nice. Yeah, I did read a book that was defining creativity recently called How to Fly the Elephant, I think. But yeah, I think creativity to me is like putting different objects or systems together to serve a purpose that is different from the initial purpose that was created for. And when you mix these different objects or systems or things together, you come up with a new thing that is different from the past. It's like they say writing is creative, art is creative, and you put these words, you come up with a book that is telling you a story. And the same goes for an artist who's painting on a canvas. They're using physical materials of colors and end up with a picture that is a story, and it's all about the storytelling.
That's a beautiful way to think about it, and it makes a lot of sense. So you're taking what we have available in the environment as raw material, and then you're turning it into something meaningful or expressive or beautiful, some kind of creation. So in order to have this skill, do you think you were born with it, or did you learn it?
I think it's a mix of both. A lot of things that we come up with, they come as a result of the environment that we lived in and the people who we were surrounded with. And I'm more into the belief that we are a product of our environments, rather than that we come up with pure talents as we come to Earth. But maybe there are triggers that are within us as we come, and these triggers maybe push us to explore more. What can we do more? What can we serve to the world? If there is like a purpose behind our presence. I hate this all the time, that people usually think about their purpose after they accomplish a certain foundation of what could be the decent lifestyle that anybody would have first, and then they would start thinking about the higher purpose. So I would say, yeah, it's a mix of both. Talent and creativity and who we are comes as a product of our environment and partially who we are in our core.
So you studied in Spain. Do you think, and you spent some year, how long did you spend there?
Well, my studies in Spain were during COVID. I was supposed to get more of Spain, but I ended up having few visits. I studied for 1 year for my master's degree, Global BIM Management, which is mainly about the technology. It's a technology oriented in the construction and architectural field. I studied the master's online, and I went there for a few meetings with the university itself, and it was like a student week with the rest of the students and the professionals who were involved in that program. But Spain gave me a lot of visions towards things we used to study in architecture at school, and especially in history. Antonio Gaudi and the amazing architecture and the history of the city. It was a great experience.
I just want to go back to something you said, which was really interesting, that people tend to want to achieve a certain threshold, and then beyond that, they start thinking of the higher purpose or their purpose. How was your approach to that? Did you start thinking of your purpose early on, or did you wait until you achieved something specific?
I would say I would never thought I would be who I am today, or not in terms of how proud I am about who I am today, even though I'm proud. But what I mean by the term is, I think we tend to, I personally have changed a lot over the years in terms of the way I think and the way I pursue the world. My definition of success and what I wanted to achieve in the world changed completely from the initial years, especially if I may stick to the years of what I think have formed my personality and thinking the most, were the years I was studying abroad, starting from my bachelor's degree in architecture. And
in the UAE or in...
Yeah, I did start studying architecture in the UAE.
Yes.
Then I moved to my home country, Syria. Yes. I did study there for a couple of years, and then I had to move again, going back to the UAE, and then I studied in Jordan to graduate from there for my bachelor's degree. So it was a lot of movement for different reasons, mainly financially, to move outside the UAE first. It was during 2008, the international financial crisis. my parents wouldn't be able to afford my education there anymore, so I had to find another place, and then I had to move again. So for various reasons, I think that those specific years have changed what I wanted to achieve in my life. And I think through this specific change, I had different aspiration to what I want to achieve. My biggest dream was to work as a successful architect in a big company, and I thought that's like the top of the ranking out there, and that's what I wanted.
Reflecting on your journey until now, has there been any key or specific memories that you hold, or experiences that you hold with you that are very memorable?
Yes, specifically in my last move, I would say, to the UK, I decided to move to London last year to call it home, and I think this was the most memorable journey of my, part of my life, and I think it was my most memorable because it was my first conscious choice of a change. I decided to come to London. I decided to live here. I decided to open another branch of my business here, coming from Dubai after I started my entrepreneurship journey from there. So I think this is the most significant moment in my life somehow.
That's very brave, because you were well set up in Dubai. You had your friends and circle of family, and I remember horse riding as well.
Yeah.
All of that.
Had a lot of hobbies there. There's a lot to do in Dubai.
Yes. And you decided to just up and leave and move to London. What actually drove you to make this decision to London? Why not New York, for example, or somewhere else?
Yeah, good question. I always liked London, New York as well. It was one of my dream cities, but I think it's probably my luck, and it was accessible for me to come to London. I came here on a business trip the first time in 2018, and I was in my first day wandering around the Big Ben. I was disappointed that it was under renovation. It was surrounded with scaffolding. I couldn't see it, but I was walking down the House of Parliament, and then I saw a security guard, and I was asking them what's going on here, because it seems like a lot of people were entering the building, and I didn't know it's the House of Parliament. They told me there is like a session right now. If you want to join in, you can come in. And I went inside, and I was sitting amongst the crowd, just watching ministers speaking about how they want to run the country. And coming from the Middle East, I thought it's a big deal. And since then, I had this perception that I want to one day come here and call it home. I think that was the moment I decided to come to London and call it home since then.
So Big Ben, Houses of Parliament, lots of architecture, lots of iconic buildings,
True.
the Shard, and various other buildings that must be quite inspirational for you as iconic buildings, which makes me think, what in your perception, what's the impact of culture on architecture and vice versa?
London is a very authentic city in terms of how it preserved its presence over the years. And one of my most favorite architects I was looking up to is Norman Foster, and I would wander around London during that year and look at the buildings that are more modern and compare it with the built environment that is from the history of architecture that formed the city, and I found it fascinating. So my biggest dream at that time was to kind of like work for a big architectural firm like Foster and Partners. That didn't end up with my story, because I decided to have a different route, which we'll talk about separately. But yeah, that was definitely inspiring for me in so many different ways to learn about this place.
So you think that culture can have an impact on creativity?
Absolutely. I think to be able to be creative, you need to have the materials, the things that will inspire you to do what you want to do, to become creative in your thing. Whatever we're talking about today is creative, is a result of our ancestors. For example, whoever is creative today writing books, let's say if they started writing using their pen and paper, then the technology of pen, the technology of paper is also a result of what ancestors have provided to us, and the result of writing and languages is also the result of civilizations that resulted where we are today. So definitely environment and culture is the basic foundation of any creative project.
I love that, yes. So everything that we're seeing, all the tools, are a creation that came up as a thought in somebody's mind, and then it was as a result of culture. So I know you mentioned one architect which had a big impact on your style and your approach to architecture. Is there any other iconic buildings or any structures or any other people who had a great influence on your perspective on architecture?
I tend to think about architecture as a researcher more than like an art consumer. So the way I would appreciate architecture is through looking at civilizations and how it was formed through history. And my biggest influence would be the history of how we became. If I want to think about it, I would start from the very beginning, how we became civilized in our modern age, and some archaeologists will mark it on around the Sumerians and then that a piece of land where vegetation was taking place, because we used to be hunter-gatherers, and then we came across the invention of how to vegetate and make food. And while we're vegetating and making canals, allowing the water to go to the plants, that was the first form of what we today call infrastructure. So it's fascinating for me to understand how we came up with the idea of who we are today as human civilization, and how over the years we kept developing these concepts.
As you were speaking, I was inspired to ask you a question, which is zooming out of this, just taking a helicopter view on the role of architects in societies. What role do you think they play, and how important is it?
I think it's significant, the role of architecture in societies, if we employ it in the right place. I think a lot of architecture recently have been drastically shifted towards more commercial schemas. Architecture or engineering in general is about solving problems. And if we want to differentiate architecture from engineering, I would say maybe architecture adds the philosophy behind what you're creating, and in terms of a space or a product, if we want to call spaces and cities products. We need to look at architecture from a problem-solving point of view more than just an artistic view, I think.
Right.
And through that we can provide what the society is in need, rather than enforcing an ideology or a space towards a place just because we think it's going to shed a light on that city, on that architect or that kind of government that we're trying to leave a short-term impression on their term so they can win more years.
So what do you think is the relationship between commercial needs, the requirement for a project to be profitable, and creativity and authenticity in the creation, as you mentioned, what the space needs, sustainability, all of that, beauty, aesthetics.
Yep.
So what's the relationship between the two, and can they harmoniously work together?
I don't want to sound like I'm trying to picture the current architectural world or engineering as a dark place. I think we are living in a fascinating era, and I appreciate everything that is happening in terms of the amazing projects that are happening around the world, and specifically in the Middle East in this part of the time. I think art have always, or any creative work, have always been funded by a sponsor. And if we look at the history of arts like Michelangelo or Da Vinci. They've always had people in power or rich people funding their projects. So I think driving technology and creativity and creation through the civilization need, whether it's through the politics or the commercial needs, I think it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But maybe during this particular time, I think we need to be a little bit conscious about how we are changing the way we live. The lifestyle that we live today makes people a little bit less attentive to have a longer span of attention. So we're having short-term visions towards almost many things around our lives, including politics, achievements in terms of ROI on businesses. Everything needs to happen very fast, including our lifestyle. We need to do as much as we can from the moment we wake up until we close our eyes at night. So it is tough, and I think maybe during this period we're shifting from becoming data gatherer towards more quality of data and employing that kind of energy in the right place. I think usually events around us are driven naturally through the needs and so the circumstances of our surroundings. As much as we think we are the reason behind everything, I think it does somehow come across as it's supposed to be, from the technologies around us and the environments around us as we progress. Even the fashion around us is kind of like affected. The way people dress is different from years ago. Now everything about the size of the iPhone, the size of the AirPods, and we dress differently. Like if you look at a person right now with less keys, for example, we used to have more keys for many things around us, but right now we can see just one key or maybe none to access your office or house or a place or car.
This conjures up images of how architecture has changed across time with the Gothic era, and you can see in London the Georgian houses, the Edwardian, but also across cultures. And I had a conversation recently with somebody who was describing a town in Netherlands where all the houses were identical in terms of the size, the paint, the shape, the height. There were, you look and there's an absolutely harmonious street of houses, whereas in other parts of the world, it's actually encouraged to have a colorful variety of houses and sizes and shapes, and everyone expresses themselves freely. And you would look at metropolitan big cities like Dubai, for example, and London and New York, and then you would look at somewhere like Barcelona or other towns, and you can compare the architecture between the two. So it's very expressive as well. It expresses culture, but it also expresses needs. One more thing is in some of the ancient ruins, like in Petra, and also recently I visited Al-Ula, where it's an extension of that same civilization. And you could see how people were carving out beautiful creations within mountains from the stones as well. So they were using the material available to create something functional, but also quite obviously aesthetically pleasing. And you can see Gaudi everywhere in Barcelona with the buildings and architecture as well. I mean, the conversation has been so exciting so far that I almost forgot to ask you about one important project. Please. So you took part in the architectural team at Palazzo Versace. Yeah. Please take us through this.
Right. So I worked in Palazzo Versace, Dubai, hotel during the 2014 time, and I think it was the kind of closing year of the project. So there were not much of design was left for me to be done. I was more commissioned on the site side of things. The most important experience I can reflect on from my experience working on Palazzo Versace was the the picture through the chain of who designs, who builds, who commissions, who operates, who sells, because some of that project was a hotel for operations, some of it was apartments for sales.
Right.
So the fact that I was dealing with Dubai municipality for approvals on final demarcation of the land, or approvals from civil defence to comply with the safety measures and the government's measures in that place, gave me a full picture around how is the industry is running, including like when you get to get things as specialized as glass and handrails for safety, for children not to climb over the balcony. It was to that level of undertaking, including the engineering behind the installation of the walls and the testing of every aspect of the building, including the artistic add-ons that we got from Italian artists coming in and painting the walls and building these piece of art and lots of expensive and luxurious elements were being added. So it gave me a very quick and strong presence toward my consciousness of the industry. And I think that was one of the key indicators for me to understand there's much more in the industry of architecture and engineering than just sketching and drawing your drawing. And there's a lot of operations happening in terms of manufacturing, in terms of building, in terms of auditing and approving. So
you've worked on this project, which is a high-end luxury project in the field of architecture, but you've also worked on other projects which are mainstream, not necessarily high-end or luxury. Have you felt any comparison between the two or any differences between the two?
Of course, every project comes with different agenda and different highlights. Working in a hotel is different. Is completely different from working on a project like an airport. I happen to work on a few airports around the world.
Right, which ones?
Kuwait International Airport was my biggest highlight. I was working back then with a company specialized in the building envelopes, a company called Kingspan, and I was in charge of the design and engineering for building envelopes for those kind of projects. And I was coming across Kuwait Airport, which I happened to work on for around 4 years. So projects like airports have different measures. It's more about meeting a demand for a certain agenda that is built by a government. A hotel is more about how can I make this experience for the end user something that they can remember and make it more profitable through the use of social media, and give them those experiments through the space of hotel and connect it with the city. In some sort, they're similar. At the end of the day, you have to deliver a project that is driven through factors that are not necessarily creatively driven. It's more about you need to deliver on time, and lots of stakeholders are linked to that chain of production. So you need to be productive on time, and sometimes things doesn't go as you plan. So you learn lots of tasks and skills from these experiences. So you have the aesthetic experience aspect, the artistic with the painter coming in from Italy, but then you also have the realistic business goals, deadlines, budgets, and so on. So working in this project, do you think it had any influence, or has it shaped your style, in terms of the experience or the artistic aspect or the design of projects? For Palazzo Versace. So when you gained this experience from working in a luxury project like this, and obviously you carried some of that experience with you into other projects and perhaps with what you deliver to your clients now, can you highlight some aspects that you took with you from that? Working on Palazzo Versace was almost through the beginning of my career. I was working as a conceptual architect in another firm where we were focusing on housing projects, something that is more personal to specific owner, or some retreat in an environmental preserved place, building container architecture, and then moving to that kind of project-specific role. I happened to learn how to deal with these different people from different chain of the industry, and I think what I took from me there is the idea that these buildings are not a product of one thought or one person, as maybe architectural schools maybe overestimate or oversell this idea to architectural students.
Oh,
where you are the center of the universe somehow as an architect, and that was as shocking as it was. I think it was a rewarding moment for me to understand that this is a creation based on hundreds and thousands of people collaborating together.
So I come from the education background, and so
Right.
you just mentioned a point that wanted me to ask lots of questions. But can you just highlight a little bit more about how you studied in a specific way and you were given certain theories, you went out to the real world, you started working straight away with a project that demands elegance, aesthetics, creating an experience, but also meeting business goals.
Right.
What were the areas or the gaps or the new things that you discovered? You mentioned the word shocked even.
True. I think the educational academia space is running through mostly, I would say, people who haven't had enough experience in the real industry, and I've seen these things change in the last few years, where academia staff are inviting people from experience to show their students how things are running in the real world, including yourself inviting me back in 2020, I think, when I was your guest speaker on the university you were working on. So these are concepts that we would like to see more, and I think they're benefiting the industry. But back to your question, I think one of the key things are missing from educational curriculums are how to prepare the students to communicate with the outside world, get them an understanding about the industry chain, rather than a silo idea of what you could be providing for your society or your company or your city, whatever is your purpose in your problem solving as an architect.
Yeah.
I think that was my key take.
I'm glad you say this. There's this gap, and specifically in your field, because you're primarily very practical. It's and I've met some students who graduate from architecture and have this vision of immediately working for a firm and do all the things that an architect would do on a daily basis, and then are disappointed because they have to do part of a project or they're doing the admin part. So preparing their expectations is probably key as well.
100%.
I guess my next question for you is, with all these young aspiring students or anyone, who's aspiring to go into that field, what do you think are the key creative skills or key skills that they need to have in order to succeed and prosper in this space?
Mainly communication, I would say. To be able to communicate through a project that is running by teams efforts is a key skill, needs to be sharpened into our young generation. Be able to be patient, not to enforce your own ideas, rather than absorbing what's out there, and be a good student again outside the university when you graduate and start practicing. I think that's a main thing for me, picking up this from experience. We recently started at XT House, my current firm, to accept some internships from young professionals or students who are still studying. And I started picking up on these things, perhaps, and maybe this is why I'm focusing on this subject the most, I would say. Yeah, but reflecting on that experience, because you asked me about a very specific project that was the beginning of my career, which is Palazzo Versace. It was a hotel, high-end. I came in, I learned what I learned. I moved to the next venture, which was a data center building, and then I ended up working in other buildings, office buildings, airports, warehouses, showrooms. So mixing up with all these different sides of the business gave me a bigger insight. Not just that, working on projects in Dubai and at the same time working on projects in Boston in the United States for another airport there, and comparing the needs and the way things are being done in terms of compliance with the standards, compliance with the culture of the people who are waiting for the delivery that they're asking for you to provide. So some clients might be having that kind of knowledge that in terms of for them to get what they want as a delivery of information, they need to give you a basic information to be your base. Maybe for some clients, they don't have that understanding and they would expect you to solve all the problems by yourself. So these different cultures and different places play a big role as well to form your understanding about the surrounding of your place. So there's nothing I would say that will prepare any student. I think they need to be ready and explore and learn out there.
Okay, in terms of XD House, so going from the beginning till the end, so you took away this experience of how to create a project, or to have how to be a part of a team that works on a luxury project, delivering, elegance of design, the whole experience, even though you weren't necessarily designing it, but you were part of it, and so you're well aware. And so all these elements into XD House, fast forward 2024, here where you're working with various clients, both B2B and B2C, correct?
True.
So how has that shaped how you deal with your clients now?
Mainly through watching how the technology have disrupted the industry. I think I joined the industry in my early career, starting in 2014, where technology was affecting the way projects are being delivered. For example, Palazzo Versace handover as a project, when we finished and we were closing the office, we were done with handing over. It was all through printing the drawings and handing over to the client. It wasn't given to them digitally only. But right now, for example, nobody prints that much paper and give it to the client. I remember we had a massive team of document controllers printing, highlighting, and I was working side by side by them to close these scopes that were closed and put the drawings as to reflect what's built, so they can do the maintenance based on these as-built drawings, for example. The whole handover was very slow and not as technology driven as today. So going through this period from my early career all over today, and I consider myself a mix of architect and technologist today as well, because I myself have involved in the area of programming more than architecture in the last few years, and I was trying to mix both architecture and technology and programming together to serve something that is far more practical and serving to the need of our projects. So you need to put all that ego aside. Your ideas of art and what looks beautiful is not as much as important as being effective in that team environment, and accept that this to be your drive is a big thing for me. So
I do recall you coming into the classroom with your 3D printed designs. You printed this statue of an elephant and various other designs.
Yeah, I'm glad you remember the elephant. I
do remember. It's very
The elephant
unique.
was the money keeper.
Yes.
Yeah, 3D printing. It was my first startup as an entrepreneur. It failed, by the way. We closed that business. Yeah, but it was a great experience. I learned a lot from it, and it led me to what I have today in terms of my firm, XD House. I consider myself as a technologist because I look at things more as a researcher rather than an architect. And the 3D printing came along as a technology, and I wanted to explore it early on during these years. I'm also coming from a technology background in terms of my career as an architect. We work in the information management, in terms of BIM and data management and automation. Worked with manufacturer for a number of years also. So we understand how design influence materials being manufactured and later on installed and tested and operated. So I started to look at the product, which is the space making, in a much broader way. That made me a little bit more conscious about the built environment.
Yeah.
And I think that's not as cool as it sounds when you say I'm an architect who makes sketches and turn them into buildings, but I think it's more realistic for what I think is my purpose to deliver. That makes sense.
What's your purpose?
I ask that to myself every day. I don't think I have the full answer. I think my purpose is to keep searching for the purpose, and it's to make the surrounding is a better place. As an architect, like we look at our built environment and think about how can we enhance it, and I think that's a good purpose to have. But I don't think anybody has a very fixed purpose. Some people, they tend to think they do, which is great. But from my vision towards the world, I think it's a very tricky area to be completely certain about.
So you mentioned innovation, and so do you think that AI, robotics, and various other developments are having an impact on the evolvement of your field?
100%. Currently, there are lots of companies who are focused on developing AI to serve the industry and disrupt the market through these technologies. I mean, in XD House, for example, we did invest in AI last year. We did hire a professional in the field, but we come as a startup with small capabilities, so we couldn't fund the R&D project for a lot of time. But we came up with a lot of lesson learned that we employed through our technologies. So just to give you a little bit of context, we are a construction tech consultancy firm. We specialize in automation and just making the complex workflows a little bit easier through algorithmic design and scripting and programming. So it's our job to use these technologies as we progress as a company. I don't think we are there in terms of the AI to make a significant impact on our industry yet, because we are, as a government, very preservative in terms of sharing data and sharing knowledge somehow. Working on projects, for example, right now, you can't work on it without signing an NDA that you cannot share this information with anybody. So everything is very restricted, and I don't blame the industry for it, because cybersecurity is a big thing right now, and people want to feel that kind of security towards their premises and buildings. So the technologies are definitely reshaping the way we do things today.
Anas, before you joined us, the guest prior to you came from the perfume industry. And I always try to reflect on the link between, various creative industries. Obviously, the theme of the podcast is creative impact. And so do you see any relations or any link between architecture and perfumery?
This is why the place smells very nice, by the way. Then maybe you got some samples early on.
Yes.
Nice. I think it does reflect. Yeah, we get inspired from different industries all the time. Like lots of technological things we're having today in the architectural world is influenced from the automotive, for example, into automotive industry, etc. But speaking about perfume industry in particular, I do like perfumes a lot. I do consume a lot of perfumes myself. So thinking about it, I think it does kind of relate in a way, because it's about making components, putting components together so they can perform a certain expression, which is, how do you feel about this smell? What does it make you feel? is it suitable for summer or winter? That's the first impression I would think about when you talk about perfumes. And I think it's the same with architecture. We design spaces to fit certain needs. Is it for education? Is it for a hospitality experience? Is it for a hot weather? Is it for a cold weather? So how do we form this sequence of systems and events to tell a story and make an expression about a space, whether to make you feel safer, warmer, or enjoy the peace in that space to be able to perform a certain task, etc. So they are completely connected in so many different ways, I would say.
Yes. And have you noticed how some spaces kind of brand themselves through smell? You walk into a building and do you remember Pier 7? You walk into that tunnel and there's immediately a smell. So there's, smell and branding and space. It's very interesting you say this, because there's been some studies that found that warm smells make the space feel smaller. And cool smells make the space seem bigger.
I didn't know that, but that's interesting.
It's got an interaction between our perception of the spatial dimension as well. I totally agree. There's a relationship, there's a connection between the two, and a lot of spaces use perfumery to brand and shape and create perception. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us or to add? Any final thoughts?
Well, thank you for having me today. I think it's a great deal for me to have to be invited to your project, and I just think it's a great opportunity to be here, to be part of your journey to leave a creative impact in the surrounding of your world, and looking forward to see what this project will bring to the world.
Thank you very much, Anas. This has been an insightful conversation. I will be reflecting on some of the nuggets that you shared today. And thanks for so generously sharing your time in your busy schedule with your startup at XD House. Thank you.
Happy to be here. Thank you very much.